If you're sick of Israel brutalizing innocent Palestinians, maybe you should have a look at what Ireland have been doing, because Ireland have been doing their bit to pressure Israel. And this week, Israel has suspended diplomatic relations with the Republic of Ireland, accusing the pro Palestine nation of anti Semitism for daring to condemn the Israeli government's brutal slaughter of the Palestinians. So the BBC reported that Gideon Saar said the Republic of Ireland had crossed every red line. In a statement, he said Israel's ambassador to Dublin had been recalled in the past following what it called Ireland's unilateral decision to recognise a Palestinian state. He added that the decision followed Ireland's announcement of its support for South Africa's legal action against Israel in the International Court of Justice, ICJ, accusing the country of genocide. Mr. Saar said the actions and anti Semitic rhetoric used by Ireland against Israel are rooted in the delegitimization and demonization of the Jewish state, along with double standards. And the Irish responded to the news with statements of their own. Taoiseach, that's the Irish Deputy Prime Minister, Michael Martin, said there are no plans to close its embassy in Israel. Martin said he had been informed by the government of Israel of its decision to close its embassy in Dublin. He said, I firmly believe in the importance of maintaining diplomatic channels of communication and regret that this decision has been taken. Ireland's position on the conflict in the Middle East has always been guided by the principles of international law and the obligation on all states to adhere to international humanitarian law. He said the continuation of the war in Gaza and the loss of innocent lives is simply unacceptable and contravenes international law. He added, it represents the collective punishment of the Palestinian people in Gaza. We need an immediate ceasefire, the release of all hostages, and a surge of humanitarian aid into Gaza. Very difficult to disagree with any of those positions, and there is something to be said, I think, for how well Ireland have played this, refusing to lower themselves to Israel's level and keeping diplomatic relations open and transparent. Israeli opposition leader Yair Lapid criticized the Israeli government as capitulating to anti-Semitism by withdrawing diplomatic relations, saying that they should stand and fight. So, in reality, there's actually very little disagreement inside Israel about Ireland being anti-Semitic for daring to criticize them blowing Palestinian children to pieces. So, Maj, what did you kind of make of this story?
Well, historically, Ireland's, ironically been one of Palestine's biggest allies, probably the biggest, because the Middle East is kind of a joke when it comes to a lot of the Arab leaders, because a lot of the stuff they did in Palestine, they actually did in Ireland first. So the same sort of characters were involved at the time. So in terms of they've had a rocky relationship, especially more recently, in terms of like Ireland's been very critical of Israel. I think it's them, Norway, and Spain that have been the most critical. I'd say Spain, I think maybe the most because they've called for sanctions on Israel, which I 100% I respect that. Um, but this is what happens, relations break down with nations, and yeah, closing an embassy or pulling your diplomats out is a big step because it ends kind of normal relations between two different countries. The only step really beyond that is sanctions and then like a hot war. So this is a really big step, diplomatically speaking. So I support the Irish government on this one, especially as they're going through. They would have gone through a transition, I think, slightly because there was an election recently, but I think the two major parties still won. But it does show you the impact that certain countries that remember colonization do remember what's happened. They do remember it well.
I certainly agree that Ireland's vociferousness on this and some of the best pro-Palestinian speeches that I've seen have actually come out of Ireland's parliament. But Ireland's connection to its colonial history has to be at the core of any conversation to do with Ireland and Israel, right? Ireland was actually one of the last countries to put an embassy in Israel in 1996, I think. It begrudgingly accepted the state of Israel and what it had done. Um, but I also think there's a big tie between when we're talking about the legitimacy of political violence and comparing the way that the IRA was treated in the sort of 80s, that sort of time, to the way that Hamas and Palestinian resistance groups are treated now. I don't obviously don't agree with all of their tactics, either in the case of the IRA or Palestinian resistance groups, but there's that acknowledgement there, and there has to be, I think, that acknowledgement that people in a situation where they have been so utterly suppressed by a powerful colonial state there's going to be violence in that situation, and so there's a certain empathy I think between the Irish people and the Palestinians. Speaking of which, though, of course there was the whole situation in Lebanon as well. I'd be interested to know what your thoughts were on the Irish peacekeepers refusing to back down. This was like a month or so ago, but it seems to me connected.
It's because I think their history with colonization is different to a lot of the European countries because a lot of European countries were colonizers. You know, like even Portugal, Spain, for example, they were involved. Russia, those sorts of countries were all kind of colonizing powers, whereas Ireland really wasn't. So I think that's what's changed it. So I think with that, they can kind of see the expansion. I think that's what it is. They can see kind of Israel trying to expand even into Syria now. I think those Irish peacekeepers are quite brave because Israel did take shots at them um, at the time, to try and push them back because they were filming what was going on. So it's incredibly brave to do that, and they would have known that if anything had happened to them, then it would have been a major diplomatic row at that point. So I think that's one of the reasons they stayed in because they knew that Israel couldn't do much to them. So but it's incredibly brave because this Israeli government are, there's no limit to what they would do. Genuinely, like the whole pager incident said it all, really, where they had no idea who they were hitting, but it was just civilians were getting killed, and yeah, it's just the depravity of the Israeli government. I think this is one of the worst that we've seen in terms of governments. I think worldwide, there's not many worse than them. I'd argue at this point. So it's incredibly brave what the Irish have done here, like in terms of trying to take a lead on it as well.
Yeah, I mean, what have we got now in terms of expansion? We've got expansion into Syria,
Yep,
expansion into Lebanon, expansion into Palestine, as in Gaza and the West
yep.
Bank. Like that's beyond the illegal occupations that they already had across the West Bank and Gaza. Like, just yeah, it's wild to me that more countries aren't taking a stand, and that it's not kind of more obvious to more countries. But it is nice to see Spain stepping out and stepping in. And of course, there's a solidarity between Ireland and South Africa. And South Africa's, of course, the apartheid government in South Africa was supported by Israel, and so there's all sorts of like there's a whole history
Yeah.
there of connection, and I think that played into why the Irish supported the South African case and continue to support it in the ICJ, right?
In terms of Israel calling it anti-Semitic or Ireland anti-Semitic, like they try to argue sanctions on Israel would be anti-Semitic and stuff like that, and you're just like, there's no like, everything is like at this point, like it doesn't matter what you say. Like that's one of the reasons why the British government didn't do sanctions, especially on the settlers during the last Tory administration, because Israel kept pushing back on them, saying it's anti-Semitic. It's like you're breaking the rules, pal. Like you're essentially getting special treatment for rule breaking. Like that's a kind of racism in itself. So like it was incredibly frustrating to kind of hear former Tory junior ministers talk about it, and even David Cameron saying, "Oh, I had all the paperwork ready." It's like, but you didn't submit it, pal. You
Yeah,
didn't get it over the line, did you? Just like
yeah,
most things in his life. So I don't, what I mean, like there's no excuse for it. Like you had Obama talking about healthcare and stuff and saying, "Oh, more should have been done." It's like if only you were in charge and you had a majority, pal. If only. But that's what I mean. Like it always happens with politicians. Like when they leave office is when they say, "If only like someone had done more." And it's like that was you.
yeah, yeah. You
So
were in a position to do something about that. Yeah,
and you blocked it as well. Like if you look at it now, like in terms of blocking the F-35 parts and stuff like that, Starmer could do that. And I heard a lot of the arguments around it, is people trying to defend him, saying, "Well, it would cause problems in the global market." He's like, "No, it wouldn't. You just put an export ban on it. It's literally what everyone else does. You just put an export ban, saying like it can't go to Israel. That's it." So like the arguments people have come up with are ridiculous, I think. But I'm glad, credit to Spain, very surprisingly, but they do have quite a left wing government, I think. So, huge credit goes to them. Norway as well, Ireland, and all the other countries that are kind of trying to push back on this. In terms of countries not really caring about Israel taking more areas, like, I mean, that's not surprising at all. Like, they call it a buffer zone. And it's just like, yeah, they stole someone's land. That's all it is. If I steal my neighbor's house and call it a buffer zone, it's me stealing my neighbor's house. So, I think it's just awful, like, in terms of
yeah.
expansion.
Yes, the alley between our houses and one of his bins is now it's a
Yeah.
buffer zone. That's just going to stuff my recycling in it. Like it's not how it works.
Yeah,
Um,
it's crazy.
yeah, and like I believe in Syria. I could be wrong on this. So someone please feel free to correct me in the chat. But like I did hear that Israeli tanks were getting within, like, I think it was like 20 kilometers of Damascus.
It
It's
was
like
near, yeah.
deep into Syria.
Yeah, they blew up, the, Syrian Navy, docks and things like that as well, like, they blew up their assets and stuff, try to argue they're Assad's assets. I'm like, I don't think, given where Damascus is, I don't think the Syrian Navy are gonna rescue him anytime soon. So, it was just a way of weakening Syria even more because it benefits, Israel. Because we don't know a lot about the, new people in charge of, Syria now. They've gone on a massive, rehabilitation cycle in terms of trying to show that they're more kind of Western and, pro minorities and stuff like that, but they're on the watch list. I believe they're still on the watch list now, and that's for a reason, especially given that at the time we were looking for anyone to back. Like what's his name? Ed Miliband got incredible amounts of stick for it, but David Cameron's like, oh, we've got 80,000 guys ready to go, and everyone's like, who are these 80,000? And he's like, people in the area, they're about, and you're just like, yeah, Islamists, like be honest, like they're radicals. So yeah, like it's a complete mess in the Middle East. It's getting progressively worse. Um, I think especially with Donald Trump coming in, I think it's gonna, they're gonna be able to hold on to the land. Like, let's not forget Israel does illegally occupy the Golan Heights as well. Like, so they've just expanded their already illegal settlements.
Support independent media, support social justice that's there on social media. Thank you. Turn left.